Ladies, gentlemen, and genetic anomalies, what is happening? Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. If not, I hope that today's stream makes your day at least a little bit better. I am your host, Nananubi, coming to you live from the East Coast of the United States of America, and we have a lot of things to get to. Unfortunately, we don't have as much time as I would like. I did start the stream a little bit late. I was actually starting to get a little enchanted with all of the stuff I was doing show prep for. Now that I was doing a whole lot of show prep, I think that the format for this stream, I'm going to go through one article and then probably react to some news clips, news and podcast clips, until I run out of time, basically. But I'm going to be talking about a bunch of things. I'm going to be talking about Trump in Ukraine. I'm going to be talking about Doge. What else am I going to be talking about? I'm going to watch a clip from, what is this, Stephen A. Smith. If I have time, I'll react to all these things. What else? Oh, the whole Trump and Elon Musk interview that they gave to Fox News. If I've got time for that, I'll react to that. And at the end, maybe we could have a little Tim Pool as a treat. But hold on, there was actually something that I forgot to do. Because when I go live, I have like a little live light on the other side of this door. I'm quite sure that you guys have seen it already. And when I'm live, I'm supposed to put it on so that people know that I'm live. They don't come into the room and stuff. I forgot to turn that on. So let me go ahead and turn it on here. It's a little too bright. There we go. Especially when all the lights are out, it's kind of crazy. Alrighty. Oh man. Also, I had to switch phones. I had to switch phones because my current phone died. So this is the phone. It technically like turns on and stuff. It does everything that like a normal phone would do except for work above this line. So basically, I was distracted. I should have paid more attention. I was trying to set this up on a windowsill because when I go to record the videos for the Nananubi Vlogs channel where I unbox videos, I like to use the Google camera app. But the thing with the Google camera app is if your phone is overheating or it gets too hot, what it tends to do, because this thing will shoot like in 4K 60 frames per second in HDR, it'll stop recording. So the windows are always cold, so I set the phone up on the windows so that it's not too hot, like while I'm in the middle of unboxing a video, a DVD or Blu-ray, and then, you know, all of a sudden then the video cuts out. I gotta start over or pick up from where I left off with two different video files I gotta concatenate or whatever. So I was setting this up, and usually it's no big deal, you know, I'm careful enough usually, but one of my younger siblings, people in the chat will probably say it's my kid or whatever, was running around in my room messing with stuff, and I was like, well, come on, leave. And so I was very distracted, so I was like throwing this up on the wall and then turning and trying to get him out. And so literally I put it up, turned, and then as soon as I turned, it fell. And so it died. It had a screen protector, yes, but I mean, you can see that nasty cut. It's bad. And also the touch doesn't work on anything here and above. So rip this thing. I had to pull out this old phone that I had before, and I had stopped using it because I thought it was gonna break, or I thought it was gonna die because it would like shut off on me randomly. It's super weird. And so that's when I ended up getting this current phone. Also, I think I'd had that phone for like 3 years or so. But, you know, it's actually worked this whole time. So, yeah, I was like, well, I'll throw the SIM card in and I'll just rock with it. And that's what I did for like a day. Until Straight Talk literally like deactivated the line. I guess they saw that I had switched phones. Apparently with Straight Talk, you have to call them every time you swap the SIM card. You can't just hot swap, which is what I thought you were able to do. But I called them, they were able to get everything straightened away. So I'm good for now until the actual proper replacement phone comes in the mail this Saturday. And then I have to do the whole song and dance with Straight Talk again, lock myself in my room for an hour while they figure it out. You know, modern technology. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Also, another thing that's annoying is that like the getting RCS configured and working on your phone is so hard. At least for me, like when you get a new phone, getting RCS working is always the hardest part. Now, I think what ended up working for me is just like waiting a few days for it to activate. But in the meantime, it's annoying because like I had a group chat with my parents that ended up getting converted to RCS because one of my parents has an RCS enabled phone, the other one has an iPhone that ended up getting RCS enabled. So that group chat turned into a RCS chat that I could only use if RCS is working on the phone. So RCS isn't working on the phone now because I got into a new phone and it hasn't been activated yet, because trying to like verify the phone or whatever. So now I just have no ability to send messages into that group chat. So that's fun. You know, I will give credit to Google for this. You know, RCS used to be kind of broken, and now like the worst part is just the verification. If they fix the verification process, then I think it'd be like the perfect baseline for, you know, any phone to use. But it's just like that one piece, you know, you gotta get on it, and if you want to be able to use it, kind of annoying. But it is what it is. Maybe they'll get that straightened out. We'll see. But it just feels kind of weird. Like I shouldn't have to wait like 2 days to be able to text properly on my phone. You know, that's one thing that iMessage doesn't have, that iPhone doesn't have. Apple users don't have to deal with that. Not that I'm gonna switch, but you know, just trying to make a point. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and cut out the music. That was Chassis by Chassis by Qbox, who is Little Limbo's producer. Very cool song. All right, so this article right here. This is crazy. So the headline here is from Fox News. It says Trump's frustrations with Zelensky escalate as U.S. turns up pressure on Ukraine to reach peace deal. The interesting thing about this is that recently Trump literally blamed Ukraine for the war between Ukraine and Russia, which is kind of bonkers to be. Now, to be fair, with the whole like Russia-Ukraine war, I actually followed everything that was going on with the Wagner group's attempt to take on Moscow in real time. That was very fun. But other than that, generally speaking, I have avoided talking about the war or following the war in the news, even because there are so many conflicting sources of information about this war. When I first started following the war, I was like looking at one source who was like, oh, Russia is about to win the war. I looked at another source that says, oh, Ukraine's about to win the war, no question. I was like, bro, I give up. You guys over there have your fun in Europe and don't worry about it. But then I noticed over the years, and yes, these things always last years, I noticed over the years that, hey, we're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine so they can continue this war. And I'm thinking like, okay, hold on. Ukraine is like this itty bitty teeny tiny country that you would think that with Russia's military might, they would be able to rout them. I understand their infrastructure is crumbling, their infrastructure is weak. They are in many respects a paper tiger with a shotgun in the closet. Basically, like, they're crumbling, their infrastructure is dying, their military infrastructure is pretty poor, but they do have nukes, unfortunately. Maybe not the most unfortunate, but they do have nukes, which is the one thing that keeps them being a world power. So I'm just looking at the dynamics, and I'm like, still, I feel like Ukraine really shouldn't have a shot against Russia. But we're propping up Ukraine because we want Russian soldiers to die, and we think that's worth Ukrainian soldiers to die. I'm like, bro, what? No. So that's one thing that I've been like really happy about with Trump, where like I know that he's going to pull support from Ukraine and just let that war come to its inevitable conclusion. It's a little bittersweet because I really don't like Russia. I once met someone from Crimea who kind of explained the whole situation with how Russia likes to roll. Not a big fan. Not a big fan. But at the same time, is it Obama's responsibility to make sure that Ukraine is like propped up and is allowed to give up one more military life? Have give up the life of one more military aged man in the fight against Putin? Like, no, I don't know. I just say, like, just let the war end. Just let the war end. The war's gone long enough. How many Ukrainians do we want to die? Do we hate Russia so much that we do not care if everyone in Ukraine is dead by the time that the war or all is said and done? Like, no. Just let the war end. But Trump took things a step further. I think he basically blamed Ukraine for the war, which, from everything that I've seen, doesn't really seem to be a reasonable take. Now, to be fair, he's got access to generals and things, but still, that just makes it more baffling to me. I don't know why this dude thinks that Ukraine started the war with Russia and not the other way around. But here we've got the article. The National Security Advisor Mike Waltz on Thursday admitted that Trump's patience with Zelensky is running thin and said that discussions Wednesday between U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, and Ukrainian officials focused on assisting Kyiv understand the war must come to a halt. Hey, Zelensky's like, no. I mean, but I was running around shooting magazine covers with people. No, but I mean, Zelensky definitely has emphatically been like, he wants to fight until he dies, basically. It's been a very clear position of his. President Trump is obviously very frustrated right now with President Zelensky. The fact that he hasn't come to the table, that he hasn't been willing to take his opportunity that we have offered, Waltz told reporters Thursday in a White House press briefing. I think he eventually will get to that point, and I hope so very quickly. Oh, he's going to get to that point. But I think, unfortunately, for Zelensky, Trump is not going to offer him anything, really. Like, what Trump is going to do, I think, is basically going to amount to pulling the plug. Oh, hold on. I forgot to... Why is my watermark off? I forgot to put the watermark back on. What Trump is going to do is basically going to amount to telling Ukraine, bro, give up, and then pulling the plug on funding, which is, I think, completely fair. I don't know what there is to discuss necessarily. Maybe you can iron out the details of how Russia is going to rule in Ukraine. Maybe even make it binding. That would actually be pretty good, honestly. I would take that, be like, hey, Russia, hey, be nice to Ukraine. Be nice to Ukraine. If you're not nice to Ukraine, we're going to send Ukraine more missiles. We're going to send them more bombers. And we're going to send them more tanks. You know how much we like to spend on our favorite daughter, Ukraine. That's like a nice carrot and stick approach that I kind of miss seeing with negotiation, to be honest. I mean, we didn't really get that with Joe Biden, and I feel like Trump didn't use it as much as he could have in the first term of his presidency. Now, he actually has with the tariffs, which have been like absolutely masterfully done. I think it's hilarious. Because my Discord server goes crazy. By the way, like, our Discord's we got a bunch of anti-Trumpers in the building. Shout out to the bread gang. But everyone in my Discord, they're deathly afraid of Trump, right? That Trump is Hitler, yada yada yada. But one of the things that they like to freak out about is the tariffs. They always freak out whenever Trump announces a new tariff. They're like, oh, how is this gonna help egg prices? Oh no, the economy's in shambles. We're going to have 50% inflation over the next 2 weeks. And my favorite part about this is that every time this happens, every single time, I think maybe except for like maybe the Chinese tariffs, I literally wait 24 seconds. I pop back into the politics channel in my Discord server, and I say, LOL. Because the way that Trump negotiates, nowadays at least, he's like, bro, I'm going to do this bad thing to you unless, and then he strikes out some sort of deal. And that works pretty well. Has been working with the tariffs, I just think it's so funny. It's so funny. The energy that has been expelled in my Discord server only like over these tariffs that ended up basically being rescinded after 24 hours is that's hilarious. But yeah, this is how Trump tends to negotiate in this second term. So hopefully he does something similar, because I mean, we know Putin, right? He's not particularly nice. He's a dictator over there. But I think I think Putin will be very happy for the war to be over. So that is a massive carrot that you can offer Russia. The negotiations, you could just exclude Ukraine altogether. Ukraine doesn't need to really even have a say. Maybe they can provide input on how they want to be treated. But in my mind, the majority of the negotiations need to be done between America and Russia. It's like, okay, Russia, if you want this war to end, you better behave and you better treat the Ukrainians well. If if you take over the land or whatever, like you can't just run around imprisoning Zelensky and all these other folks. You have to treat the Ukrainians well and with respect. Something like that, I would love to see. I don't know if that's what we're gonna do, because we've seen time and time again that if there is a perfect option, Trump is going to absolutely not take that route. Right? Not to hate on the guy, but he has not picked like the best options for many of the decisions that he's been making. So I feel like Trump probably isn't going to do that, but that's something that I would like to see. I think that'd be a fine and fitting end to the war in Ukraine. All right, we've got this interview here. I don't know if it's an interview, actually. This is like a press conference. This is from Trump at Mar-a-Lago speaking to the press. This clip comes courtesy of Forbes Breaking News.
Thank you. Yes.
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that the U.S. would ever support?
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections.
Well, he hasn't said no. Honestly, I don't care. I know there's claims that like Zelensky is corrupt or whatever. I don't know how true those are. I will say it's kind of interesting that he got some like rare hypebeast sneakers, that cost hundreds of dollars. I don't understand. If you care about Ukraine, I feel like you would donate money to the military rather than just give Zelensky shoes, right? To show how much you care. And if you're Zelensky, I feel like you wouldn't be running around buying fancy shoes for yourself. I don't know.
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating. And where a country has been blown to...
I feel like it's based, like... I don't know what Putin's plans are in Ukraine, but like unless he's gonna like genocide all the Ukrainians, the decision to engage in war rather than like surrender or strike some sort of peace agreement, I think it's just a poor decision. And Zelensky begging on his hands and knees for the war to continue rather than trying to push for some sort of like agreement of peace is just, I can see why it's 4%, right? I mean, probably everyone who lives in Ukraine or lived in Ukraine probably knows at least 2 or 3 people who have died in the war. And then you see Zelensky pushing for that war to continue. Like, the war will continue until what is it? The war will continue until success increases. Like, no, that's not working.
Smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition.
It looks like Gaza.
Site. So many of the cities. I mean, they haven't done it in Kiev because I guess they don't want to shoot too many rockets in there. They've done it.
I think one thing that's interesting, the left is very, very upset about Trump pulling support from Ukraine. I personally don't mind it. It's exactly what I wanted Trump to do, because it's like, bro, like we're just giving money to the losers so that they keep on losing and that their soldiers can keep on dying. That sounds pretty bad to me. But the left, the interesting thing about the left is I've seen how they respond and react with war. They view winning war as like morally reprehensible. It's like, how dare you win this war? Which is kind of funny, actually, considering the fact that they opposed the Confederate Army. But they're like, the worst thing you can do is win a war, right? When it's like Russia declaring war on Ukraine, the worst possible thing in their eyes is the inevitable winner winning the war, Russia destroying Ukraine. Like, sure, I agree, Russia shouldn't have attacked Ukraine, but it's not like the absolutely worst thing that they could have possibly done. Not the greatest, it's pretty bad, but still, or with like Israel Hamas, right? That one is a little bit that one's a little bit more interesting because Israel didn't initiate the war, right? It was Hamas, but they're looking at Israel, mad that Israel's winning a war they didn't even start. It's like, man, come on. I think these people probably maybe they grew up with participation trophies or something. They're like, oh, it's so unfair. A winner and a loser in war? Who would have imagined such a thing? Who devised this scheme of international diplomacy?
20%, but they haven't done it 100%. If they wanted to do it 100%, it would probably happen very quickly. But you have cities that are absolutely decimated. And yeah, I would say that, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people have to, wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, like, it's been a long time since we've had an election. That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
Interesting. So Trump is saying that he wants to have an election. He wants them to have an election, and other countries are telling him that they want to have another election. Interesting. I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware that other nations were clamoring to have Zelensky, not deposed, but have an election. If Ukraine had an election, I wonder who would win and how that would change the landscape over there.
Ukraine is being just wiped out. Look at what's happening to the cities. There are cities, there's not even a building standing. It's a massive, you talk about Gaza. I mean, it's literally, these cities look like Gaza. Actually, many have, percentage-wise, more buildings knocked down than in Gaza. So, people are tired of it. People want to see something happen. And, the other thing that it's been bothering me for a long time, because I solved the problem with NATO. They paid hundreds of billions of dollars into the funds of NATO when I said you got to pay, because the United States was paying for European countries, and then they take advantage of us on trade. But I've seen it. Look, they have to pay. They have to find out, where's the money going to? We have, I believe President Zelensky said last week that he doesn't know where half of the money is that we gave him. Well, we gave them, I believe, $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that, but it's a lot. And we have to equalize with Europe, because Europe has given us given a very much smaller percentage than that. I think Europe has given $100 billion.
So he's talking about NATO. I mean, Ukraine is not in NATO, though. This tangent is completely irrelevant. I don't know why he's talking about this.
And we've given, let's say, 300 plus. And
bro, I love this comment from John Stacy 8250. Trump keeps on talking, but it's obvious who the cameraman is in love with. This is funny. Trump is not your friend, Zelensky. Oh no. Who could have told us this? I think from the beginning, Trump was very open that he was like, no, we're not going to pay the losers to keep on losing. Didn't he say that?
It's more important for them than it is for us. We have an ocean in between, and they don't. But where is all the money that's been given? Where is it going? And I've never seen an accounting of it. We give hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't see any accounting. So I want to see peace. Look, you know why I want? Because I don't want all these people killed anymore. I'm looking at people that are being killed. And they're Russian and Ukrainian people, but they're people. Doesn't matter where they're from on the whole planet. And I think I have the power to end this war. and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land.
That's a misleading headline. It doesn't sound to me like he was talking about Ukraine. It sounds like he's talking about the previous administration.
And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it.
Oh, I see. Ukraine. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, he is talking about Ukraine. He's saying that, like, Ukraine was claiming that they weren't invited to the negotiating table.
Invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine.
To be fair, if you're not invited to the negotiating table, it's pretty hard to negotiate. So, something to keep in mind. You know, a small detail.
That would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad for this. He was so bad, so pathetic. It's so sad. But with all of that being said, look, it is what it is. When I left, there was no chance that this could have happened, but it happened because we had incompetent leadership at many different levels. But when you see what's taken place in Ukraine with millions of people killed, including the soldiers, millions of people killed, a big percentage of their cities knocked down to the ground. I don't know how anybody even lives there. You know, when they say they took a poll, and Zelensky's at 4%. Who's living there? You know, I mean, people are, it's hard to believe that people live there. Their cities are being knocked down, and this is something that would have never happened. And by the way, for 4 years, it didn't happen. It was never going to happen. Go ahead.
One follow-up question.
Actually, you know what? Hold on. Wait a second. I didn't plan on doing this. Hold on. I didn't plan on doing this, but I'm going to watch this. Because I can't imagine what the left-wing argument for just allowing this war to continue and, like, for more Ukrainians to die could possibly be. How do you spin this to be, like, morally correct or, like, the moral, like, way to go when it comes to this? So I'm going to run this CNN segment. This is the left-wing perspective here. Really want to see how they defend the decision to just pay these losers to keep on losing.
Zelensky said Ukraine could never accept peace talks without Kyiv's involvement, a message meant for President Trump. He called a meeting between Trump and Putin without the presence of Ukrainians or Europeans dangerous.
Some in Europe may be frustrated with Brussels, but let's be clear. If not Brussels, then Moscow. It's your decision.
Zelensky also took questions from our own Christian Amanpour. He talked the mixed messages from Washington and also the need for continued dialogue.
Do you understand what America's position is?
Yes.
Which is?
I think, to my mind, they are preparing atmosphere for their dialogue.
For their dialogue, which will be?
For the dialogue between Trump and Putin. And I think this is, it's up to them, but they can discuss everything they want, but not about Ukraine without us. And that's why in this case, especially in this case, I think it's a little bit dangerous. That's why I said that we need to talk more with the president and to talk more with his people, with his teams. Yesterday, as you said, yes, we had good conversation, and I think that I opened some new details for vice president. That's why I said we need. It's not waste time. It's really very important, I think, diplomatic investment for the future. Just and lasting peace for Ukraine.
This is an interesting take. I think if I was in his shoes, I would generally agree. But I think the thing is the one who has the keys to whether or not this war ends, it's not Russia. It's not Ukraine. It's the United States of America. Because this is like basically you ever see like stories about, oh yeah, this is like the war between Ukraine and Russia is like Al Jazeera America, where it's like, if you don't, it's not like necessarily beneficial, or like if you stop funding it, it's gonna collapse, right? If you stop funding, it's gonna collapse. And so if you feel like you gotta cut costs, you cut costs there, and then it just dies. Like that's kind of how this war is going, where it's like, you know, this war, the way that things are going, the way that it's being funded and financed, it will never end until all the Ukrainians are gone and they run out of volunteer soldiers. That's generally like the trajectory of this war. And so Trump is basically doing what Al Jazeera did, pulling with Al Jazeera America, pulling the plug and be like, you know what, we're not really benefiting from this anymore. We need to cut costs. Let's get rid of this. And then it's dying. The tricky thing about Zelensky, what he wants here, is that he wants. He sounds like he has demands for what happens next. He's like, oh, you can't talk about the war in Ukraine without including me in the conversation. Like, who is he to say anything? I mean, he has the least amount of leverage. The least amount of leverage out of anyone in this conversation. Russia has the most advanced military weaponry, as well as probably the largest fighting military force in the region, right between the two. And then Trump is the one who is giving Ukraine all of the arms. America is the side that is giving Ukraine all the arms. Ukraine does not really have much to bargain with. Now, I think if I was Zelensky, what I would be doing is, because Trump is really the one who will decide whether or not this war continues, I'd go to Trump and be like, hey, this is a list of every single thing that I want. You know, even with contingency plans for if Putin ends up taking over Ukraine in some sort of peace agreement. This is how I want us to be treated. This is how I want us to be ruled. This is how I want things to go in the doomsday event that Russia just so happens to win the war in Ukraine. And then Trump can talk about that with Putin, but there's no more needed input from Zelensky. If Russia says, oh, we want to do this, what is Zelensky going to do? Tell him no? And then what happens? Then Trump pulls the plug on the funding and they all just get wiped out. Like, no, I'm sorry. You're talking a little tough for someone who has absolutely zero leverage in this situation.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I thought you were going to say some more things.
Your order.
Yeah. You just sort of, I suddenly got flummoxed.
I'm sorry.
You said Putin doesn't want peace. I mean, you just said it loud and clear here.
It's true.
So what is the dialogue? And have you convinced the
Putin wants peace if the peace is ruled by Russia.
Americans that A, Ukraine has to be at the table, and B, I guess the Europeans have to convince them that they have. Did you get a commitment from President Trump that you would meet with him first? Do you have a plan to meet with the president?
No, we have our plan, of course. It's our country, and that's why it's our plan.
All right, let's go now to CNN's chief national security correspondent, Alex Marquardt. Alex, in his remarks, Zelensky said it would be dangerous for President Trump to meet with Putin before him. Also talked about this army for and of Europe. Give us the headlines.
Well, I think both those things, Victor, really speak to the uncertainty and fear
is this a hard news segment? I thought this would be an opinion
about the United States right now, particularly when he sees President Putin cozying up to President Trump and mixed signals, frankly, from different members of the Trump administration. So this was a really striking set of remarks from President Zelensky, both his own speech and then in that interview with Christian Amanpour. It was, for lack of a better description, a call to arms, both literal and figurative. I mean, he said in no uncertain terms that Europe cannot count on the U.S. anymore, that the relationship with the United States is evolving, and there may come a time when the U.S. simply says no to Europe. He pointed directly to the speech by the American Vice President J.D. Vance.
And that's a whole different conversation, which I think is rather interesting. It'd be interesting to see what Trump wants to do. I think that having Europe as an ally is good, but having I forget what the term is, but like America shouldn't be Europe's sugar daddy, right? Right? I think maybe being like I don't know, cousins is fine. Being equals, you know. I just don't like how disproportionate it is that like Europe. I feel like there's no negotiation ever. There's no negotiation ever when it comes to Europe. It's like Europe wants to do certain things. It's like, okay, we fund them. Especially when we see Europe descending into fascism, right? Either right-wing or left-wing fascism, because we're seeing both. But we're seeing just all across Europe a penchant for authoritarianism. And like these are all these countries are soon going to be run by dictators within like the next 30 years. And it's like, and some of them already are, right? Like England. And it's like, bro, why are we funding the operation of this conglomerate of nations, which is becoming increasingly, what's the word? Like diametrically opposed to Western values, right? Which like democracy, free speech, these are Western values. Why would we fund an operation that is opposed to those core values? It doesn't make sense. So I would like to see Trump sort of push back on Europe and be like, no, freedom is good, actually. And then use that as a condition for funding their the little project they got going on over there.
Just yesterday, Zelensky saying that, basically paraphrasing Vance, that decades of this old relationship between the United States and Europe is ending, and that Europe needs to adjust to that. Here's a little bit more of Zelensky said earlier today.
Some in Europe may not fully understand what's happening in Washington right now, but let's focus on understanding ourselves right here in Europe. We must give strength to Europe first. Does America need Europe as a market? Yes, but as an ally, I don't know. A few days ago,
Oh, that's great. No, I do think that America does need Europe as an ally, but we need to change the dynamic of the relationship, though. It's kind of funny because I think the way that Europe treats us, they act as if they have all the leverage, even though we have all the money. It's like, oh, what are you gonna do to us, Britain? Bomb us?
President Trump told me about his conversation with Putin. Not once did he mention that America needs Europe at the table. That says a lot. The old days are over when America supported Europe just because it always had.
And so Zelensky called on Europe to band together and defend their own interests, and he said it should be done through European armed forces. He literally called it an armed forces of Europe, so that Europe's future depends on European needs and European priorities. Victor and Emma, of course, there are major questions about the state of these negotiations, which haven't even started yet, but there have been accusations that the Trump administration has already been giving concessions, has already been doing favors to President Putin. We heard the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, say a couple days ago that American forces would not go into Ukraine, that Ukraine would not be a member of NATO. That's something that has been echoed by the president himself. So there were a lot of questions.
Oh yeah, and that's got to be pissing off Zelensky, because that's like one of the biggest things that Zelensky's wanted. He wanted to get I don't want to say that he wanted to get into this war, but one of his aims in this war has been to curry favor with Europe and NATO and get NATO membership, because the way that NATO works is if you're a NATO member nation, then you're obligated to fight whoever attacks that nation, or at least provide assistance when requested, because it's a coalition and NATO has like many small nations, so it's like you could try and chip away all these itty-bitty nations and all of a sudden, wow, you've taken over all of Europe. So it's helpful to have like a network of allies over there. So that's like one reason why NATO works, and I understand the case for it. But at the same time, there's a difference between NATO having, NATO having its club or whatever, right? And everyone who's in the club, gets all the benefits. They get all the money and the gold and all that stuff, the guns and things. There's a difference between that and just all of the nearby tiny nations being like, hey, I want to be in NATO too. So I see no reason why we would be obligated to give Ukraine NATO membership. I don't necessarily feel particularly strongly about it, but I also think that it's going to be viewed as an aggressive or antagonizing move by other nearby nations, such as Russia, to say, you know what? Yeah, that nation that's right on your border, we're gonna make that a NATO member state, and what that's gonna do is it's gonna make NATO bigger, and we're gonna encroach on your boundaries. They're not necessarily going to like that. So I do respect the caution that America has taken in general when it comes to making Ukraine a NATO ally. I think even Joe Biden didn't necessarily commit to making Ukraine a NATO ally. So
for J.D. Vance when he got here to Munich from the Ukrainian side, from European officials. He kind of equivocated yesterday in Vance's meeting with Zelensky. He said that he wanted to keep all options on the table, that he was preserving optionality for President Trump. So certainly a lot of concern among the Ukrainians, among the Europeans. These negotiations just getting started in Ukraine, wanting to make sure that they are at the table when the fate of their country is really what's in play here. Victor Amra.
Alex Marquardt there in Munich for us. Thank you. Let's bring in now former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Ivo Daalder. Mr. Ambassador, good to have you back. Let's start here from the framework of President Zelensky's remarks, saying that Europe needs its own alliance. We must build the armed forces of Europe so that Europe's future depends only on Europeans. Saying,
dude, honestly, that's so based. That's like actually stuff that like people in the right wing, I think, as well as Trump, has been saying. It's like, Ukrainians, why don't you like build up your own infrastructure? You guys should not be relying on this for everything. This is the positive side effect of if you pull back your funding. If you pull back your funding from certain places, they might start building stuff up on their own. So who knows? Maybe we'll see like Europe actually building up its own like military infrastructure and stuff, and actually doing what they can to help out with the other European nations, rather than being like, oh, you know what, Uncle Sam's got it, we don't need to pitch in. This would be very, very cool. And if this happens and America remains an ally with Europe, but that's just going to be even better, right? Because America can bring in the big guns if the big guns are ever needed. But if small guns are needed, then just let Britain send its tugboats.
That the U.S. doesn't appear that they really need the Europe as allies. What was your reaction as former ambassador to NATO of that framework from Zelensky?
Well, my reaction was one of sadness, though I think he is also correct. I do think that the United States in the past few weeks has behaved in ways that make it incredibly hard for Ukraine, which is at war, for Europe, which is living on the continent at war, to rely on the United States. The United States is proving not to be a very reliable ally. And the two things that are most shocking over the past week are, one, the fact that the President of the United States decided to get on the phone with Vladimir Putin without talking to Europeans or without talking to Ukraine to promise a...
I do admit that's nasty work. That's pretty mean. At least give Zelensky a courtesy call. With his newfound perspective that Ukraine started the war, I can see why he's giving them the cold shoulder. But I do think that that's not just mean, but it's also unfair. Trump should have done the courtesy of just giving at least one call to Zelensky.
Peace conference and a peace conversation that would take place between Washington and Moscow, even though Moscow is the aggressor and Kyiv is the victim, and not make them part of it. And then secondly, the lecture that we heard here from the Vice President about the nature of democracy, coming from a Vice President who still does not recognize that in 2000 Donald Trump lost the election and Joe Biden won.
Oh yeah, that's actually a good point. And I can't believe that more people don't talk about the fact that Donald Trump has, up until this day, refused to acknowledge the fact that he lost to Joe Biden in 2000.
Was not taken well by people here. And so there is this question that President Zelensky put on the table. Are we really still capable and able to rely on the United States, or should we rely only on ourselves?
And even in that context, President Zelensky said today that there would have to be some security guarantees to agree to peace with Russia. There are already security guarantees from the 1991 independence after the Orange Revolution. So who would have to offer those guarantees? Would that be the U.S. again, considering the situation?
Here's a question for the chat and also anyone in the comments who might be watching this after the fact. How long do you think treaties should be respected? Do you think that we should just abide by treaties forever? Because I understand it from like the chivalry perspective, where it's like, oh, we're America, we keep our word. But at the same time, like, bruh, Trump may have his own aims that sort of exist beyond whatever the geopolitical realities of like 1991 and the Orange Revolution happened to be, right? Over time, a country's attitudes and desires changes. So why should we in 2025 be burdened by the American approach to international affairs of 1991? I think it's a question where you can have a fair answer on both sides. I'd be interested to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments in the live chat. But that's something that I've been thinking about over the past few years off and on.
Ukraine finds itself in now, or would those have to be guaranteed by Europe?
Well, I mean, I personally would argue that those guarantees would have to include membership in NATO for Ukraine, which is how we traditionally have dealt with the insecurities on the continent. This is a continent that only had 12 countries as members of NATO. It now has 32, and the reason is because certain parts of Europe have found it better and more secure to be part of NATO than not be part of NATO, as we found with Finland and Sweden. But the president has ruled that out. He has taken the Russian mantra that the war was caused by the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. That is, of course, absurd. The war was caused when Russia invaded Ukraine. And we had Pete Hegseth, his defense secretary, ruling out not only NATO membership, but U.S. participating in any security guarantee. So again, I think what President Zelensky is saying is we can't rely on the United States. We have to rely on Europe. And now is time for Europeans to do more, not only to defend their continent, but also to help and secure Ukraine's future. It's a tough task for Europe. It doesn't have the forces at the moment. It is not spending enough in order to get those forces. But I see in Munich here a wake-up call among Europeans to say, we would like to do it with the United States. We would prefer to do it with the United States, but we've got to do it even if we can't do it with the United States.
You know, that's interesting. You say you see a wake-up call there, because former President Biden used to tell stories about the former German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the questions about U.S. leadership and abdicating its position on the world stage. Do you think what happened this week, the pairing of what we saw from Vice President Vance and the reaction in the room and what happened today with President Zelensky is a pivot point for Europe?
Yeah, I think it's a pivot point. You know, it's not only what happened here today and yesterday, it's also what happened this week. The phone call that the president made with Vladimir Putin, the tariffs that have been imposed on aluminum, steel imports to the United States, the reciprocal tariffs that are about to be imposed. The United States, under Donald Trump, has a tendency to turn friends into enemies and enemies into friends. That's not the way in which most Europeans think the world ought to be run, and as a result, they're going to have to figure out a way to deal with the world as it is without the United States, and at times even have to oppose it.
The interesting thing about that is I was expecting, sort of like talking about, how bad it is that we're about to pull the plug on support for Ukraine. And I actually did not see any of that. I was rather surprised. I was rather surprised by that. But in general, it's nice that we're probably going to see the war end. Unfortunate that Russia's going to win, but like, bro, did we really think? Did we really think that Ukraine was going to beat Russia in a war? Like, come on, y'all, come on, fam. Let's not be ridiculous. All right, so we've got one more video to react to. Steve Mnuchin went on CNBC to talk about the things that Musk and Doge have been uncovering as of late. Doge, I know that Doge gets a lot of hate from like the Blue and On people or whatever, but I think Doge is pretty cool. Doge is pretty cool. I do wish that there was like a little bit more like transparency or proof, because a lot of people are like, oh, that line item you're cutting doesn't even exist. And I'm like, it's kind of a wacky thing to make up. And like, who are your script writers? Why would you write something so unbelievable rather than writing something that's actually believable if you're going to make up a lie like this? I don't see the argument for saying that Doge is literally just making up things as part of its cuts. I don't see that. I don't see that. But yeah, it's like, bro, like, why are we spending millions of dollars on like Arabic Sesame Street? Like, we don't need to do that. Let HBO pay for that if they want to.
There was a special guest joining David in Miami. Let's get to David.
Hello, we'd like to hear
Carl, thank you. Yeah, I think at this point it's fair to say that former Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin's become a friend of the show, right? We can call you that now?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Stopping by here, and good to have you. Carl and Jim were just talking about Doge. I'd love to start there and get your sense, both given the 4 years, obviously, you spent running the Treasury Department. What is your sense as to the level of waste and fraud, so to speak, broadly speaking, in the U.S. government?
Well, I think the good news is Elon's group is uncovering a lot of things that I think we're all somewhat surprised by. I think that as it relates to Treasury, Treasury's job is really a giant payment processor to send out the payments, and they get certifications from the other agencies. I mean, the big one that everybody's talking about is obviously, and President Trump talked about yesterday, is these really old people apparently getting Social Security checks.
Do you really buy that? I mean, is it really possible they've missed millions of people who are over the age of 100? Come on.
It's hard to believe. I would hope that they check that quick.
Why is that hard to believe? The idea that like nobody is doing a Social Security fraud, or Social Security fraud is not something being done at a large scale, it's like, that would I don't know, you guys trust the government too much.
Yes.
And audit whether it's a data issue, because if it's not, it's pretty astonishing.
It would have to, I mean, it would put into question everything, and then certainly embolden the effort if that was true. But I guess I find it hard to imagine that could possibly be true, because then it would mean they're just terrible at doing their job entirely, wouldn't it?
Well, so I mean, they have the data. I think they've even showed the spreadsheet that they received. So what's the counter argument? Is the spreadsheet completely made up? Are they making up these Excel spreadsheets for fun? Or is the internal data wrong? And if the internal data is wrong, then how do they even know that this level of fraud is not happening?
It seems like an easy thing that someone checked. You know, I recall I had a big title as managing trust.
I think kind of the point is that they're not checking, right?
Like an easy thing that someone checked. You know, I recall I had a big title as managing trustee of Social Security, and you know, I was always very focused on issuing new types of Social Security cards. I still think it's crazy that Social Security issues paper cards in the days of electronic ID. So there's definitely a lot of things to do there.
Yeah, certainly there's been a lot of attention as well given to the access that the Doge team has had to various systems, whether it be Social Security or Treasury. Scott Bessent, obviously the Treasury Secretary, now allowing that. Are you comfortable with Musk and team having that kind of access to Treasury?
Well, my understanding of what Scott said is that you have two people that have access to read information and not write information. If that's the case, it's completely appropriate. They're just looking at the information. By the way, a lot of this information feeds into public systems anyway.
Yeah, the people freaking out over like, oh, no, these government is like the way that people are freaking out, being like, oh no, government employees are going to be able to see my social security number is like absolutely ridiculous.
Right. Stephen, we've had an ongoing dialogue with you about TikTok. It's something, obviously, that you very publicly stated your interest in quite some time ago, if there was an opportunity. The clock's ticking here on the ban actually coming into effect, I guess, again. Where do things stand? Is there a deal being worked on?
Well, we're having conversations with some of the people behind the scenes, and I'm hopeful that the president and vice president who's working on this will be able to reach a deal. I mean, I've always said the most probable way to reach a deal, have U.S. investors invest into the company, have ByteDance spin it off so the existing U.S. investors can stay in the business, dilute the Chinese ownership down to 20%, which is required by the law, and make sure that the technology is disentangled. Now, that part of it may take some time, but I think if there's a deal, that's the most likely route.
Do you feel like progress is actually being made, and or where is the, is it ultimately going to just be something that the president decides one day?
I think he wants to save it, so I'm hopeful that he comes up with a solution that works for national security issues and that the Chinese sign off on it.
I mean, all that has to be done is that the company needs to divest from China. You would think that that wouldn't even be that hard to do. Even if I'm like from China's perspective, I'd be like, bro, there are so many communists in America. Just find a rich communist and have them buy TikTok for me. Like, is that so hard? Is that so hard? I will say, and I have said this before, I think I actually have a video about this where it's like, you're kind of fooling yourself if you think that TikTok is worse for American surveillance or censorship or security than Google is, right? Google is far worse probably. But TikTok ain't great. TikTok ain't great. But I mean, if we're going to let China literally buy farmland in America, I feel like TikTok is maybe not as high on the priority list of things that we need to do to protect ourselves against China as a nation.
The money I would think available potentially to try to get a deal done, given the potential returns. And obviously it's not an insignificant effort to get the technology moved and rewrite a lot of that code. You think you're going to be a part of it?
We'll see. I think it's primarily technology driven, but we think it's a great business model.
All right. Well, you're now obviously in the sort of more of the private equity business, so to speak. We've had you on talking about a number of the different deals that you've done. Well, what's the sense of the environment right now, given rates haven't really moved very much in a favorable way?
Well, look, I've said on rates, my view is inflation's taken a little bit longer than people expected to come down. It will come down. Whether it comes down to 2% or 2.5%, 2 3/4, I think it'll be in that range. I expect the Fed will lower short-term rates, but I think 10-year treasuries at 4.5% have that already priced into the market.
Yeah, I mean, we got a pretty hot CPI number just the other day. It certainly didn't seem to augur for lower rates anytime soon.
I think the Fed's being patient.
Yeah. And finally, there's been a lot of conversation recently about whether there's the gold that we think there is at Fort Knox. When we were sitting down here, you reminded me, you actually have a very specific personal experience to tell us. Is there the gold at Fort Knox?
The gold was there when I visited it. I hope nobody's moved it. I'm sure they haven't. I was the first Treasury Secretary to go there in, I think, over 50 years.
That is insane. How can you not check the vaults in 50 years? It's wild. He must have breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the gold was still there.
Serious security protocols in place, obviously, to protect the gold that I can't talk about. But we went, we saw it, and if President Trump wants it to be audited, that's obviously something that can be easily done.
I think you went in 2017. By the way, I'm curious. You said that you were the first Treasury Secretary to visit in 50 years. Why did you actually go see the gold?
We thought the gold stands for the U.S. Although it's not backing the U.S. currency, it's obviously a major asset of the Treasury, and we thought it was something important to do.
Stephen, always appreciate it. Thanks for being a friend of the show.
Thank you.
Stephen Mnuchin, former Treasury Secretary. Guys, the gold is there. It's at Fort Knox. At least it was when he visited.
That's cool.
David, thanks. We'll talk in a little bit.
Well, that's actually good to know because I know people are like, oh, is the gold still at Fort Knox? But it's nice to know that it's still over there. All right. There are some other clips I want to react to, but I just don't have the time. So you know what? I will hold these clips for the future. There's a potential for me doing a stream on Saturday. So when we get to that, then I will be able to go over those clips. So I think it's about time for me to go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. I do appreciate each and every one of you for popping into the live stream. If you didn't have a chance to check the live stream for whatever reason, or you literally just now tuned in because YouTube likes to show off live streams not long before they are about to end, well, then you can either go down here, join my Discord server, and I talk about, my future streams, what I'll be streaming live next. Also, sometimes I'll send in links to new videos that I post. But if you want a little bit more consistency out of me, because I don't have a strict streaming schedule right now, go to the Not a Newbie Highlights channel. Subscribe, because I upload 3 videos a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at noon. I very rarely miss a day. I did miss a day last week, but I think my computer died or I was tired or something. But I very rarely miss a day. I'm almost always posting a video on the Not a Newbie Highlights channel every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It generally will have the most interesting segment from my stream that I can think of. So it's like, hey, if I haven't streamed in 2 weeks, well, hey, you literally are gonna get a video from me tomorrow. So you're never without some Not a Newbie to watch. That's the goal. That's the goal. So go check out that channel. I also will be soon starting to upload on the Not a Newbie Gaming channel again. So you might want to go check out that channel if you like gaming streams and my gaming content, and you don't like my political stuff. I think there's probably more than a handful of you guys there. I got many TDS sufferers in the chat, many TDS suffering bread boys. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this stream. I will see you guys in another stream, I suppose. Peace out, y'all.